Um, it, the holidays really are a time for us, I think, to reflect on why we're here, what our purpose is, what we look ahead to next year, what are our hopes and dreams for the future. And really, that's the question that I want us all to think about today, which is what do we hope for the future of Baton Rouge? I had a lot of time, as Edmund began to mention, as I grew up. Many of you may not know, but I was the first in my family to go to college. And, the idea of kind of being reflective and thinking about where I would be and where I'd go started actually in the summers when I would take road trips with my father, who was a truck driver. And we didn't take very many of these because as soon after anything longer than about an 8-hour ride, I'm wanting to stop at the next truck stop and, get out of the car, and I was just driving crazy. I'd sit there on the CB radio as we're driving down the road and always, breaker, breaker 19, getting weather checks and all this stuff. And it was an awesome time to be on the road and really spend time with my dad, but also sort of think about this great wide open world and great wide open road in front of us. And oftentimes my father, still to this day, if you're ever riding with him, he wants to take the scenic routes. And inevitably, he gets himself lost. And he will say, I'm not worried about being lost because I can always reflect back on where I have been. And we can always go back. And if we go back, we can find our way forward again. And really, that is the story that really encapsulates my life. And see, as I told you, I grew up in a neighborhood where the only school options available to me were what today we would consider to be failing schools. I grew up just outside of Shreveport, and we had no options in terms of great school opportunities until a teacher intervened in my life and really motivated me to go to the local magnet school in Shreveport. This magnet school changed the world of possibilities for me. My parents loved me, they supported me, but they didn't know about educational opportunities in the same way that this teacher was pushing me to go towards. And that opportunity, that sort of combination of great fortune, but also hard work, because it wasn't enough just to have the chance to go to a great high school. It was that I had to work my tail off and compete. And ultimately, that opened up a world, as Edmund described, that I've felt like my life's purpose is to give back, to give to others the opportunity that I have had the chance to do. Now I'm about a year into this service. I started officially on February 1st, but really I started last December 21st when the Foundation's board made the announcement. And, as I reflect on this time and where we are as a community, there's a lot of sort of dark clouds in our horizon. We're a city and that really I question often, what is the opportunity that's available in our community and in our country? For the last 50 years, we've seen a pretty precipitous decline in what opportunity could look like in this country. There's been studies done of are your children better off than you are? Will the next generation do better than we're doing? And we've seen, unfortunately, by some indicators, that it's more of a coin flip today of whether our children are going to end up better off than us. And I know that even though my parents didn't have all the educational opportunities, they wanted this for me. They wanted me to be filled with opportunity, and they wanted me to have a bigger purpose in life. And I think when I think about Baton Rouge and I think about what is the core mission of the Baton Rouge Area Foundation, ultimately I think it's about providing opportunities to more and more folks in our community. And yet, every year, we conduct a survey that sort of asks the questions, how are we doing in this community? What are our dreams? What are our hopes? What are our fears and worries? And today I want to share a little bit of this year's results in our city stats, the annual survey that we've conducted for more than a decade, conducted by LSU, that really combines both actual facts and data on the ground with how people perceive we're doing, how people perceive the future. Unfortunately, today, a majority of parents in this community do not think that their children will thrive here in the future. This is the highest number we've seen since we've been conducting city stats. Additionally, when we ask the question, do parents want their children to make a life here? Do we want children to come back to Baton Rouge, perhaps after college, after an initial job? Do we want them to feel like this is a place that they can live and raise their children? Only 6% of Baton Rougeans are saying we definitely want our children to come back here. A majority of parents want their kids to live somewhere else. And that is heartbreaking. That is an absolutely heartbreaking stat to sort of hear and to realize that a majority of our families are worried about their kids staying here and thriving. They're worried if they're going to do better than they are, so they're wanting them to go someplace else. What's interesting, though, is even though you see this sort of sourness right now on how people think about Baton Rouge and whether they should stay here, I actually see some nuggets of glass half full here. One is this slide, which is people want change faster. People want us to move much faster in getting things accomplished. Now, they are not trusting in traditional institutions to create this change faster. A majority of people believe that if we're going to make Baton Rouge a better place, where they think change is going to come from, they think it's going to come from nonprofits, faith-based institutions, Rotary, Baton Rouge Area Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce. They also think it's going to come from business leadership. They don't have faith in necessarily government institutions. And who can blame them? I mean, we see this nationwide following the pandemic that trust is at an all-time low. That said, though, we all have a rallying cry here to think about, in that if we want to hope for a better future, we have to address some really, really hard facts. Some other key takeaways in this year's survey that I think are illuminating to you all, because again, this room really represents, I think, the heartbeat of our community. We are seasoned leaders. We are people that are connected in ways that we can come together and solve big challenges. 2/3 of residents feel like they have no ability to be part of the change in this community. They don't either know how, they don't know what steps they could personally take. Maybe they haven't been invited to create change in our community. But 2/3 of residents are saying they don't know how, they don't have any agency to get involved. But they're telling us what needs to be addressed to get done. And look, it doesn't take a survey to have to tell you or tell any of us what we think the biggest opportunities for improving our community are. Obviously, top of the list on everyone's mind is rising crime and violent crime in our community. Connected to that is education. When we think back through the pipeline that, as you've heard from law enforcement officials before, that they're really dealing with the symptoms of the challenge. And so education has been listed as another top area to fix. And then traffic, that just hold on until 2023 and 2024. But I hear good things are coming after that. But what's important is to sort of reflect for a moment on, while this news, especially at the holiday time in a room so nicely decorated as this, it's hard to confront these kind of brutal facts, these brutal realities about how people think. And just, again, reflect for a minute. What's the conversation that you've had maybe across the Thanksgiving table? What's the conversation at parties and the office cooler here at Rotary have you had about the challenges we face? You know, in times like this, I'm by nature an optimist, but I think it's really, really important that we also reflect on the hard truths that are in front of us. And I don't know how many of you have read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, but there's a story in there about one of the most famous Medal of Honor winners in America's history, Admiral Jim Stockdale. Admiral Stockdale was actually the head of the White House Fellows Commission, which I was a part of. He was the head of it during the Reagan administration. And Admiral Stockdale had this experience during the Vietnam War to be one of the longest prisoners of war. He was shot down in flight, captured, and for more than 8 years spent his time at the Hanoi Hilton, as you may have recalled Senator John Kane speaking about, who was also there. Admiral Stockdale was one of the leaders who began the sort of resistance. He got the men together through tappings on the walls and different ways they could organize themselves to sort of stay firm and true. He would go on to say that it was those who were the optimists that ended up not being the ones to make it. And you think, whoa, what is that about? You see, Admiral Stockdale was beaten over 20 times. His leg was broken multiple times. And yet, through it all, he said what got him through, and maybe what got the others through, was that he could both confront the brutal reality that he did not know if and when he would ever leave that prison. But he never lost faith that it could be changed. And that's why he continued to organize his fellow soldiers, even though that probably meant more beatings, more torture. He held those two truths at the same time. And that's what's been known as Collins writes about the Stockdale paradox, is that can we both hold the realities of what we face in our community here in Baton Rouge with the idea that we can change it, that we can actually make this community a place that our kids and grandkids want to come to and stay, that others want to become part of our community. Can we build that? I think the answer is yes. I think you're here and you've stayed here because the answer is yes. And I think we don't have to look very far back maybe to find our way, because we have confronted hard truths before. Downtown 20, 25 years ago, before I arrived in this community, as I'm told, boarded up storefronts, crime on the streets, homeless challenges, businesses vacating and moving out. Yet we began as a community to focus on downtown and had a revitalization. 2 master plans that came together to transform what is now downtown Baton Rouge, where you have new hotels, restaurants, businesses. Is it in need of an upgrade now after pandemic? Absolutely. But we can look back at our past and say we confronted a empty and dying downtown and created wonderful venues where we come to the Shaw Center and the Manship Theater and we gather together for Live After 5. We've done that before and we can do it again. You know, Louisiana suffers from being at the top of many of the worst lists. Obesity is a disease that is plaguing our population in particular. Yet when confronting those challenges, what did we do? We as a community decades ago, off of a transformational philanthropic gift by Doc Pennington, founded the Pennington Biomedical Research Institute, which today is a worldwide leader in addressing obesity. It's helping to solve those challenges. And then the metabolic research is connecting to so many other things, like now long COVID studies. Again, we confronted some really hard truths, and we started doing something about it. Too many of our families are dealing now with the rising cases of children with autism. Autism is something that has split families apart. It's challenged even the most well-resourced parents with trying to navigate complicated systems of how do I help get services for my child. We came together with community leaders at the Baton Rouge Area Foundation and helped create 2 initiatives that are ongoing to help address this and be a lifeline for families. The Capital Area Autism Network and Exceptional Lives, which at least equips parents with tools on how do I even navigate? How do I find a doctor's office or a dentist that is familiar and has helped students with autism before in getting critical care? These types of things have been a way to address a really hard truth when other communities may have turned a blind eye. Following Hurricane Katrina, which I experienced as a New Orleanian teaching in public schools there, transformed that system after it. But we in this state decided we weren't going to wait any longer with the effects of losing our coastline and the effects of massive storms that continue for whatever reason to impact our way of life. We established the Water Institute of the Gulf, also with a transformational investment after the BP oil spill, another brutal reality we face, but didn't decide to wait on others to help us. we began to invest to help solve the challenge ourselves. And today, we have one of the leading scientific institutions in the world addressing water inundation issues. And then finally, one that I'm quite familiar with and biased towards is the power of education to transform lives. We sat here 15 years ago, and Baton Rouge was now the capital of the most failing schools in the state of Louisiana. We were really a community where if you were wealthy or well-informed, you had every educational option you would want. If you were not, you were really sentenced to a cycle of year after year attending schools that didn't prepare you academically, housed you in unsafe, unclean conditions, and trapped and perpetuated other challenges we've seen today in crime and whatnot. But we as a community did something about it. We said, and this isn't the only solution to education, but at least what I was able to work on was how do we bring new schools to break that cycle? How do we give kids and families options they never had before? And today you've got over 12,000 families that are able to pick an option that they weren't able to 10 years ago. That's 30% of public school kids. We did that. We in Baton Rouge were able to confront a really brutal reality that some didn't have options and others did, but we did something about it. And so that is really, I think, the message of this season for me is that while I'm a huge optimist and believe that we can confront our challenges, because to find our way forward, we did need to look back. We need to be reminded and re-inspired that we can come together and solve some really big issues, even though we may be in our most depressed state at the moment, even though we may be at our lowest level of parents who want their kids to stay here. We can change that. And I hope you will join us at the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. I hope we at the Baton Rouge Area Foundation will join you in creating this change in our community. How can we begin to do this? We don't have a monopoly on ideas, but we certainly have ways that we want to plug in with you, and we think you can plug in with us. First, I think we need to begin encouraging civic pride. I think we are being leaders in this community have to take ownership of both acknowledging, yes, that is a challenge in our community, but guess what? We can do something about it. And I think that starts with the conversations we have in our holiday parties for the next few weeks. Second, I'd encourage you to become a member of BRAF. I'd encourage you to think about how you can leverage your change agent ability to put your personal passion project on our radar, and vice versa. How can you plug in maybe with others that want to create bigger change? And finally, because it's what we do every day, is we really want to empower and expand philanthropy. How can we create a culture that everyone can give back? And we can give back in strategic ways that change some of our hardest truths and hardest challenges. Again, I look back over my life and I probably should not be here. I got a really fortunate opportunity at a time that I didn't expect it, and then I used that opportunity to develop in my life. I don't want opportunity to just be a one-time shot. No parent does. And we've got a chance in our community, if we're smart and we're working together, to put in place some things that create real change to our biggest problems. We've done it before, we'll do it again, but it takes all of us together, and we want to be your partner in that work. So happy holidays to you all, and thank you. Happy to take any questions. Jay.
We're at the end of 2022. 2023, what do you see as being our biggest challenge, and what would you say is y'all's biggest goal for the upcoming year?
Yeah, look, I think the number one challenge remains, which I think everyone is telling us this, it's violent crime in our community. And while recently our numbers may be slightly down this year than they were last year, if you look at our 5-year trend, they're unacceptable. And any time there's a violent crime in our community, it's unacceptable. That's something I think we can all do together, do something about. We've been working behind the scenes with some folks on that. I think you'll see some announcements soon where we can come together and give those 2/3 of people in our community that think they don't know how to get involved. What can I, as an average citizen, do to affect crime in our community? Hopefully, we can give some tools and ways for people to plug in and help address the problem both today, but also work on the longer term root causes. So that's top of list.
So we can celebrate the 30% in the schools. We celebrate that. But how might BRAF partner with the public schools to address the 70% now that you have an opportunity to reach and partner with public schools? How do you envision that working?
Yeah, I mean, I would say our goal all along, even when I was at New Schools, was to partner with public schools. So the schools we work with are all public schools, and providing parents those opportunities. I think I'm really encouraged by the new leadership that's coming. There's, I think, still a couple of elections this weekend. You really see, again, an opportunity that we've got to be in this together if we're going to address some of these serious challenges. I think you're going to continue to see an education landscape where families need more options. We don't have enough good schools, and it doesn't matter what kind of school it is. Any good school that a parent wants to go to, I'm for. And I think we need to encourage that, and certainly BRAF has long been a champion of education, but not just in K-12. I think we need to look even earlier and younger, that we have seen some great models in other communities that have addressed the just powerful effects if you can focus on early learners and make sure that every child has access to a high-quality early learning center. I mean, think back during the pandemic, how when there wasn't quality care or any care for children, things shut down. And so how can we begin to address that? That's something I care a lot about. And I think as we think about real root causes of opportunity in this community and in this country, I think there might be no better investment we can make as a community than a real system where every kid has access to great early learning options. Yeah.
I want to piggyback on that. The project you mentioned, I think, is the one where public-private partnerships. So I'm kind of interested in how you plan to approach the public side of that, the public funding issue. What projects and what kinds of interactions do you see ahead?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think if you look over, I think the history of our community, when we have gotten big things accomplished, it really has been a partnership of government, business, and philanthropy all coming together with a shared vision, shared accountability. And I think that's critical. I think, a recent Greenville trip that the Chamber took, which I was a part of, I think it sort of re-sparked that conversation of we have to be working together. And, I think coming out of the pandemic especially, we need to find renewed zeal, because you're exactly right. When we've gotten big things done, it's not been one organization. It's that each organization's kind of pulling together to create something bigger, and that's certainly the way I believe we need to go.
Just to clarify, was your survey limited to the city limits, or did it encompass all of East Baton Rouge?
So this was parish-wide, and you you can go to city stats, brcitystats.org to learn more about this, or go to our website, braf.org, and you can link there. But a survey of our neighbors, representative, and conducted by LSU. And so this is a trend, and we've been tracking it over the years. So you can also see trend lines of how some of these perceptions change. And unfortunately, some of these negative perceptions are not waning yet. And I think that means, and I think they're telling us what they want to see us as leaders, government, business, philanthropy, community leaders come together and help solve. Yeah, Rouge.
Hi, Chris. If you had to, so I imagine in your position, right, you have a laundry list of things that everyone's wanting you to tackle, but you have to prioritize. So if you thought of the top 5 things that BRAF is investing its money and energy in, starting in the new year, what are those top 5?
Such a great question. Well, I mean, listen, it's driven by a couple of things, and maybe for a second, let me just take an opportunity to sort of describe how BRAF works, because I think sometimes we've been noted as being this sort of shadowy, it's unclear kind of what we do. So let me be just frank. We're your community foundation. So we exist to serve you. And that's donors that have $10 million or donors that have $10. We want to be everyone's community foundation. Most of our work is driven by our donors. Our donors tell us, I want to give to my church. I want to give to this early child care initiative. I care about crime. What can I do? So most of it's a conversation we have with donors to help hear their priorities and then help tell them some of these trends. So part of my job is to really educate our donors on what's happening, what are the trends, and how can we better assist you. So that's the first thing, is my priorities have to be theirs, but it's also a two-way street and a two-way conversation. The second part of BRAF is that we have some resources that have been left to us, sometimes that donors grant to us, that we can go take on big projects like the Water Institute, like downtown restoration, like the lakes restoration. And so those are projects that really come together often because there's a need, but other organizations either can't, won't, or it requires, to the question, a real collaborative effort to get done. Most often we're getting involved in projects because one organization can't solve it. It requires a much bigger table. And so, again, I don't know all 5 yet because I'm waiting to hear what donors want. I'll tell you what I care a lot about. I care about what moves the lever of opportunity in this community. We know education does. We know crime has to be addressed or people aren't going to be here. We know we have to begin to invest in new transportation technologies, both because people want us to, but because that is going to be a pressing issue. So we go down this list, and BRAF's going to set priorities around those areas, but it really is a two-way street, and that's why BRAF's your community foundation. Let me be really clear. I work to serve you.
Great presentation. When I think about crime and education, I think there's a lot of turf issues that you got to fight. And given what you just said about BRAF, it seems like part of your emphasis to progress on these issues is to figure out how to get around some of those turf issues, especially with the people that own the crime issue and own the education issue. Can you talk about some of your thoughts on turf issues and how BRAF deals with that?
Yeah, I mean, we all are people that operate in our own organizations, our own lanes. But again, I think in our history, we've gotten big things done. We've come together. I'm actually more hopeful. Again, I'm the eternal optimist, but I can still confront brutal realities. I'm more hopeful that we have leadership in place in each of those areas that is working together. Now, I don't think we've done a great job as a community always putting that on front and making it easy for people to get involved. In education, you have great collaboration now, I think, between the superintendent and other groups that are trying to create choice. I think there is a sort of common vision, especially coming off this election, where you'll see people come together working for all kids. In crime-related issues, I've seen public safety officials work in ways that, again, I haven't been here, but for a decade, where this didn't happen years and years ago, but now you've got the DA, the sheriff, the police chief actively working on projects together. And so I think our job in one of these scenarios is how can we kind of bring a table together that elevates that there is collaboration, highlights a key kind of priority and goal we can go after, and then give everyone a chance to participate and be part of that change. So I'm actually more hopeful in those areas, but it does take coordination because all of us in our own daily lives are going to get right back to what we do every day, our own families, our own jobs, et cetera. And this is where we've got to make it easier for there to be civic participation. Yeah, David.
Chris, I loved what you said about kind of changing our narrative of how we speak about ourselves because I firmly believe that if we don't speak positively about ourselves, no one else will either. So with that, how would one open up a donor advised fund with BRAF if they were inclined to do so?
Call me. call anyone at this table. Again, we would love and we want to make it easier for that. I think the first way is you can go to our website. You can find information there around what is a donor advised fund. You can find out what does it mean to be a member. Like what do I get? No, it's not a country club. It's a way to plug into action. It's a way to give back. It's a way to understand trends and feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. So I would encourage any of you, again, utilize us. We're your community foundation, and we want to help amplify what your passion is. But I do think that underneath it all, if I took a survey in this room, I bet your top 5 list is very similar to what the public said. the things that we want to see change, that we know we can be a better place for our kids and grandkids. And so that's what I hope to leave you with. Utilize us, and we look forward to partnering with you. Happy holidays to each of you. Thank you.